Hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Amy Nye with the Sunlight Foundation. I am the Partnerships and Training Manager here, and just really want to welcome everyone to the webinar today on open states. And we are also joined on the phone with James Turk. He is our lead developer who's based out in Boston, who really helped get this project off the ground and is in charge for all of the great things that we'll see today. And also here in the room with me is Gabriella Schneider. She's our Communications Director. So before I get started, I just want to say a couple of things about Open State. The website that you see and that I think a lot of folks have played around with is really a culmination of 4 years of work of developing the data behind it. So instead of just thinking of Open States as one site, I really would like to think of it more as a suite of different tools and resources from the API, which is the data that powers the tool itself, which is also available, and I'll cover that a little bit throughout this presentation, to the fact that we also have a mobile app for Open States that's available for iPhone, for your iPhone and for your tablet. So there are a number of different tools and resources that comes with Open States. You know, this has been a project that's been ongoing here at Sunlight for, over 4 years, and it's a project that we are all very proud of. And one of the things that, I think as an organization we really wanted to do in terms of making the data available is to put it not just having the information behind the scenes, but also create the site that people can actually get to the data easily in one place. So I think the best way to do this webinar is just to kind of jump right into it, and we will walk through some of these skills and resources in Open States. So you can find Open States at openstates.org. And I always like to think that there are a few ways to get started with the tool. So for folks who are interested more in your local jurisdiction, you can just put in your address. And I'll just put in, because I live here in DC, not as interesting, I'll put in my old address when I lived in New York. So when you put in your address, what this will show you is your district, and also pull up your local members. So this is my former state assembly and state senator. So you can click on the representative, and here there are a number of things that are showing right here. On the very top is a sub-navigation that will are shortcuts to different sections of the page, and as well as a little bit more information in terms of the available data that we have for this member. And we've also integrated the data from Influence Explorer. So we have the campaign finance information for this representative. And another new feature that we have here at Open States is not only are we aggregating this information, but also if you're interested in this particular member, you can follow this legislator. And if you don't have an account, it's fairly easy to sign up for one, but I have an account. And now you can just follow this representative. So whenever this member has a new bill or has voted or anything like that, you can get an email alert letting you know what's going on with this representative. You can see here we also have the contact information for the member. The next section here is the media section. So we have scraped information from different RSS feeds to provide you with news and blog coverage on this member. And also we have the committee membership of the senator, as well as most recently sponsored bills and recent votes. And on the bottom here, you can see the sources. So this is where we are getting the information from to populate this page. So I'm just going to click on a bill here to show you what this information looks like. So when you click on a specific bill, you'll see that there is a progress ribbon on the top corner here. I'll let you know what has happened. So this bill has just been introduced recently. And as with the ability to follow the legislator, you can also follow this specific bill if you're interested. So whenever there are any votes or actions that happen on this bill, you'll get an email alert letting you know what's going on. And then additionally, we have the original bill text and the sources and citations. And everything that we are doing here is really just passing on the information from the original sources. But what OpenStates has done is really standardize that information into one easy site for you to find, whether you live in New York or whether you live in California or any other state, Illinois, you can now see it in a standardized format. So another way that folks can use OpenStates is actually just by browsing a specific state. Just go back to my home state of New York here. And you can see now we have aggregated kind of the summary information for the New York State Legislature. And the map on this left-hand side is actually an interactive map. So you can just click on a district, and it will populate for you the members from that district. You can zoom in. And then we have also summarized the party breakdown of the Senate and also of the Assembly. Also let you know the numbers and different types of committees that are in the New York State House, as well as list the most recent activities in the Senate and in the Assembly. And at the bottom here, we show you the available sessions that we have for the state. And here in New York, I don't know if there are folks from New York, they run on a 2-year cycle, and that's why we have 2011 and 2013. So you can click on a committee, and it'll show you the different members that are on the committee. You can also just sort by you can search by name. And also, what you can do is look up bills. So let's say, for instance, here in New York, we're interested in gun legislation. What you see here is the different pieces of legislation. And when we are doing the searches, it's not just searching for the title of the bill. It's actually searching through the text of the bill as well. And if you're only interested in specific sessions or one that's only in the Assembly or in the Senate, you can do additional filters. And a lot of times, let's say, for instance, you heard of a bill, on the radio in the morning, and you don't actually remember the bill number, but you remember the name of the sponsor. You can also sort by the sponsor name to find the bill in which you're looking for. Type also is another filter that we have that allows you to only search for bills, or maybe if it's a resolution that you're looking for, you can do so. And also you can search by subject for a broader search. So are there any questions on the search? Am I going too fast? Okay. So another way that you could use OpenStates is actually just searching across all of the states. Let's say I'm interested in marriage legislation. And what this does is showing you bills that have the word marriage across all 50 states. You can also filter here at this point by a specific state. If you see there are a number of bills from Ohio. Let's say you're interested in only Ohio. Now it's showing you only bills with the word marriage from Ohio. So that's pretty much the basic search functionality of OpenStates. I also wanted to mention when you are in a specific state that you can also look at events. And we don't have this for every single state because not every single state makes this information available. But when it does, we have captured that information and made it available here in OpenStates. So you can see some of the upcoming meetings, committee meetings that are happening. You can also just very simply add this to your Google Calendar or your iCalendar. And we've also put in the sources for where this information is coming from. So OpenStates is a fairly easy to use tool. And I also want to highlight in our About Us page the data that's behind it, and also where you can access the code. And then I know James, do you want to talk a little bit more about the data that powers OpenStates and how frequently the information is updated?
Sure. So the data that powers OpenStates, as Amy mentioned, all the sources are on the bottom of any page that you visit. So you can see exactly where we're collecting the data from. It's always the official website of the state. We currently update every state nightly. From time to time, the state site has a hiccup, so there might be a slight delay. But generally speaking, that means that if the state has their actions up, most states update their site towards the end of their legislative day, so usually like more in the 5 to 8 p.m. range, and we update our site at about 9 p.m. to midnight to try to capture all of that. So generally speaking, information is no more than 24 hours old. If there are any issues, you can always contact us, but usually that just means that there's some little hiccup on the site. There are some states that only update their data once a week, so you'll notice if you're in a state like Rhode Island, for instance, that the data seems to lag a little bit longer, but that's right now the best that we can do, given what the state can provide. We are working on trying to change that with the state. That's about it right now. I'd be happy to take any questions if people have them, though.
Does anyone have any questions about the data behind OpenStates or? So then I also want to show you the account. So once you are logged in or created an account, you can also see what are some of the things in which you're following.
So you said you can actually access the data and the code?
Yes. Can someone mute their phone? So the information that powers OpenStates is in our OpenStates API. James, do you want to talk a little bit more about how folks can use the information here?
Yeah. If you're not familiar with an API, what that is that's just a way for a program that you or somebody in your organization can write that will collect information. We provide all the information like a nice machine-readable way, so you can do bill searches, bill lookups, legislator searches, and then store that data on your system or provide it to people on your website. We make all that freely available. All it takes is signing up for a Sunlight API key, which is a free process. It takes about a minute. The page that Amy's on here, openstates.org/API, has details on that. If this is, technical and kind of scary to you, that's fine. We also do make available bulk data downloads, which have some slightly friendlier formats, including, Amy, would it be possible for you to navigate to the downloads page?
Yeah, absolutely.
That has bulk downloads in CSV and JSON. JSON is a more complex format and has all of our data. CSV is a little bit simpler, and so it's a subset of the data, but it's generally useful as a head start. We're also, able to take on reasonable requests if somebody has we can't necessarily do things on an ongoing basis, but if there's a subset of the data that you need on kind of like a one-time basis, we're happy to make that available if you get in contact with us. And as far as the code, all of our code for the project is on GitHub, github.com/sunlightlabs/openstate would be where you'd find that. All this code has been developed by our team at Sunlight, but also a group of 50-plus volunteers. And we do rely on volunteers even now to help us keep the data as up-to-date as possible and to power things. We're constantly working to both improve the data that we get and also to, fix issues as they arise. If the state changes something on their site, we need to respond to that.
Right. Were there any other questions before I continue? Okay, so I'm back here on your favorite site. So you can actually also turn on or off your notifications. So let's say, for instance, I am following these things, but I don't necessarily am interested in getting an email. You can just easily turn the email notifications off. And one of the reasons why we actually decided to create a legislator the ability to follow a legislator is because, when we're talking to lots of different folks in the space who do work with legislative data, and a lot of times who are the folks who, are very familiar with the State House. And for them, a lot of times it's not necessarily just a specific bill that they're interested in. So for, let's say, for example, in New York, it's pretty much anything that the speaker does is going to be important. So it was more interesting for them to be able to follow an individual and know what they're doing, from a resolution to whether, recent votes have been taken by this member and how they're voting. That is what was more interesting for them as opposed to just following specific pieces of legislation. So that is a new feature that was added on recently. And I also then want to mention that there are social media buttons here. So actually, when you are in a specific page, you can be sharing, let's say you found an interesting bill. A bill on trust in the states doesn't seem very interesting, but I will click on it. You can easily share that specific piece of legislation either on Twitter or on Facebook. And then also want to iterate, too, that for what you're getting email notifications on are really just the actions and the votes. So this section here.
The conference has been muted.
Oh, gosh. All right. How do I Can you tell who has it? I can't. I'm pretty sure I'm muted. They just said the conference has been muted.
We can hear you and no music now.
Okay, that sounds great. I was trying to figure out if I had muted myself as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you did it right. I think it muted it.
Thanks for that feedback. Okay, and this is what James was mentioning earlier, that the sources are on the bottom of each page. And because it is very difficult to maintain the database of legislation from all 50 states, and many times, aside from a handful of states, there are 2 bodies in each of the state houses. That's a lot. That's almost like 100 different data streams that we're making sure that information is correct. So we always encourage, if you see something, because a lot of folks here who are on the phone, you are experts in your own states. If you see something that's wrong or something that's different, let us know. You can easily contact us. It's on the bottom of every page, and we will fix it. So are there any other questions about open states? And I think James had answered one of the questions online about whether we keep older information. So Open States is a project that we've been working on for, like we mentioned, for over 4 years now. And one of the things that is very useful for Open States is that, not only are we covering the current session, we are archiving all of the information that we have scraped and have access to in the past. So depending on the different state, you can see, how far back the data goes. So here in Arizona, we have the information back to the 49th, and then we also break down for you the different special sessions, because a lot of times, depending on the state, sometimes they will come back for a special session just to pass 1 or 2 pieces of legislation. So we have listed out all of the information that we have for each and every state.
And there was another, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, there was another question about if we'd be going and getting data from previous sessions. That's something that we are very interested in doing. Unfortunately, most states only make that available in much more difficult to parse formats. It's something we've done in some states. I know Illinois, for example. Now we go back to the 90s. But most states we only go back to 2009 or so. But we're hoping to be able to change that. And if you happen to have any contacts at a state that might be able to help us change that, we would be happy to talk to them about taking in some of that archival data. Also, the question about territorial governments, we do include Puerto Rico already in our data. We have DC and Puerto Rico in addition to 50 states. As far as other territorial governments, most of them don't have much of a web presence for their legislatures, but should they develop one, we would definitely be eager to add that.
Right, I was just going to show Puerto Rico. Here we go.
I'll just keep answering questions as they come in. There is a question, how quickly do you convert bill text from the state's format to your format? That is something that we do nightly. So as soon as we see it on a state site, we usually check somewhere between 10 p.m. and midnight. As soon as we see it up there, it'll be reflected on our site. So generally no more than 24-hour delay. There's another question about campaign contributions being available. We do have some basic campaign contribution data displayed on the site. That all comes from our Influence Explorer site. And if you go to the legislators page, you'll see a little bar graph of their contributions by year. And that clicks through to Influence Explorer, and that data is provided by the National Institute on Money and State Politics.
And I'm just going to click over to it. That's what we were showing earlier today. And when you click on it, it will bring you to the profile page of the member.
Let's see, the next question in here is, any consideration of making bill digest and bill analysis available? They vary in quality state by state. Sometimes easier for like bill text. Those bill analysis documents we do collect. You'll see on a bill page, generally speaking, that we have a list of supporting documents that the state has published. There's a chance, because so many states publish them in different places, that we've missed some. So if you're looking at a state and you're not seeing those and you know that they exist, I'd be happy to address that. If you could just click the contact form and send me a link, I'd be happy to take a look.
And I just pulled up an example here. For this specific bill, there is a sponsor's memorandum that's aggregated in the document section, and that will link you to the memo.
I'm not sure, Amy, if your screen is being shared anymore.
Oh.
Sounds like people.
Sorry.
Well, Amy pulls that up.
Here.
To answer Tom Mortenson's question, do you know if any state legislatures use this to see how other states view an issue? We haven't had that feedback yet. The site's only been full launched for about a week at this point. We have had feedback on the mobile app from people in various state legislatures. They find it very useful to track what their own state is doing. Sometimes our tools are slightly better than what they have available for themselves, and I hope that states will use it more and more. But we haven't had that feedback just yet. And the question, thanks for the feedback on IE8. There might be a couple issues. If you could take some screenshots about IE8 and send those to the contact link, we'd be happy to take a look and have our design team also take a look at what's happening. The question about NCSL, they are not formally involved. The only involvement that we've had with NCSL has been they did invite me to speak last year about the project, so I was able to present the project about 6 months ago at the gathering that they had in Chicago, and that was a great experience. But other than having us there, they haven't had any involvement.
And I also wanted, I know James, you just mentioned it earlier. I had not realized my screen had stopped sharing. That it is, so this is a specific legislator, and this is what James was referencing in terms of linking out to Influence Explorer in the profile page.
The next question I'm seeing in the chat is, are you able to select multiple states in search? That's not, other than they have the 50-state search and you have the single-state search, but your question about selecting 30 states and searching, that's not something that we support just yet via the public interface. It's something that we want to develop. It is possible to do if you use the API and query, but right now on the public site, that's not something that we support, although we do hope to in the near future.
And James and I actually were talking earlier today. One type of search that could be interesting for folks. Let's say for instance you're interested in ethics. I wanted to know, which state houses actually has an ethics committee. So I believe this is something that we are hoping to allow you to search not just in the bill and the names, but also allow you to see what committees. You can search through the committee names. Are there other questions online, James?
Those are all the if anybody has a question online that I had missed, I think I went through all of them. But if anybody else had a question online that I'd missed, feel free to chime in here on the phone. Yeah,
you can just hit *7 to unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, another question just came in, which is, are we able to track amendments to bills? The answer to that question is that amendments to bills do show up as documents and also as actions. So we have anything that the state records on their site. We also carry, if the state publishes multiple versions of the amendment, or multiple versions of the bill, like as amended and prior to amendment, which not every state does, we will also have those versions, and we'll be able to compare the text with them by pulling them both up. Some states are actually pretty bad about the amendment process, and text just sort of changes without much notice. In that case, right now, we don't have a full-blown solution, but it's something that we have been looking at and working on in the states where that happens. And committee votes was another question that just came in. The availability of committee votes varies very drastically state to state. Even at the federal level, it's kind of a shaky proposition to get reliable committee votes. Unfortunately, they're often done in secret. When committee votes are published, though, I know it tends to be my answer for these, but when committee votes are published, we do collect them I believe that's only maybe 10 or 15 states, definitely not the majority of them.
I believe in New York, when we were going through the example, New York had committee vote information.
I believe New York is one of the states that publishes them, yeah.
Right.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
When she put up the screen for New York and you had the term ethics, it said there were like 146 items under ethics. When you look below that, it was honoring Michael Jones for this and honoring Mary Jane for that. Do you have a common term of reference for words like ethics and that you use? I mean, because now this time she pulled up, there's 341 that just came up. And the first one, obviously, well, I don't know where they went to. They just disappeared me. Okay, requires each branch of state government political to establish and abide by a code of ethics. Okay, now that one's obviously very ethically focused, shall we say. But when she first pulled it up...
I highlighted one.
Yeah.
Do you see that one? I think that's sort of what you're referencing.
Right, those type of things. So it doesn't seem to be compatible with the A4144 up above. They seem to be out of sync for some reason.
Well, so that we are searching the full text of the bill. So the J490? J490 would have the word ethics somewhere in the actual bill text. We're not just searching the title. We're searching all of the text.
So if they're saying hypothetically that Mr. Lawrence here was an ethical grand marshal, it would pick that up. Where what I would be looking for is more like the A4144. In my mindset, looking for the requirement to do the state requiring ethics codes to be established within local jurisdictions, etc.
Right.
And I think for folks who have worked with the different state houses, you all know, I'm sure, that there are a number of different resolutions that are passed that are slightly less substantive than bills. So that is one of the filters here. So if you change this to just bills.
Okay. Sorry to complicate your life here today, but
no,
I'm just curious on, when you try to look something up from, especially when you bounce from state to state, if there was a common term of reference.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you, because I think a lot of times when you're doing searches, you're searching for all the text. So the information that is being returned it can be confusing in the sense of that's not exactly what it is I'm looking for. So I think that's why on the bill sites at least, the filters are very effective. So if you're looking for ethics and you are looking for a specific piece of legislation, you definitely make sure you're doing the filter by bill, and that will help omit some of the resolutions and other types of documented information that's not what you're looking for. And I think depending on the state, too, that being able to do a subject helps limit some of that information that's coming through. So let's say I'm only really interested in ethics and campaign finance and elections. I'm not quite sure there's a bill here, but I'm just going to do this as a search and see what happens. Okay, so now we've narrowed it down to 6 pieces of legislation that has ethics in regards to campaign finance and election issues. And these, from at least the titles themselves, seem like the ones in which I'm looking for.
Just to answer a quick question that's related to this, I know there's a couple other questions in the chat I'll get back to, but somebody just asked that they noticed that the subjects dropdown doesn't always have subjects. It does depend on what the state makes available. So there are states where subject categorization isn't available yet. So if you're not seeing subjects, that is right now a limitation in the state. It's one that we're looking at ways to solve. We're hoping that maybe we can categorize state bills for states, but that's a tricky problem and not one that we were able to tackle prior to launch. But right now we only categorize bills in 35 states or so, and that's based on whether or not the state provides any categories themselves. There was also an earlier question. There's actually a question on here that I'm going to have to just refer to Amy. about if we're doing any more presentations of the sort? Amy, right now we don't have anything planned, right?
Not right now, but we'll be more than happy to schedule another one if there are folks who are interested. And also, all of our webinars are, whenever we do one, they are recorded and we make it available on our training portal. It's called training.sunlightfoundation.com. It's Sunlight Academy, so that you can see previous archived webinars that we have done in the past.
And this is Gabriella speaking. If you're from a newsroom and you can gather at least a handful of folks to join you, we'd be happy to, if you're in the DC area, come to you and do a training for your newsroom or set something up online.
Right. And then if you're an organization and are remote, I've also done webinars for organizations and for staff. They tend to be a little more comprehensive of other tools and resources that we have. So it's not just necessarily on OpenStates. It will be on Scout or Influence Explorer, and just teaching folks how to use that and how to optimize these tools and resources for their nonprofits. And if folks who are interested, feel free to contact me, and I'll put my contact information up. Trying to return to the screen. Here it is. So, yeah, that's my email information, and that's James's as well. So if there's any questions, please feel free, or if you want a training for your newsroom or nonprofit, just get in touch with us and we can make that happen. James, are there a couple of other questions that?
Yeah, there's a question about if we support Boolean or proximity operators to allow fine-tuned text searching. You can use a lot of the basic operators that you can use on Google. It's very similar. So you can use terms like and or that will make sure that both words appear, that one word appears. If you put your search in quotes, it will look for those words together. That's the extent of the proximity searching that we have at the moment. Let's see. Lots of bills that include, to follow up on the current question, somebody writes, there are lots of bills that include the text of current statutes in addition to the proposed revisions. Is there a way to search for text only by the proposed revisions? Unfortunately, we don't have that information. States don't provide that separately, and it's not something that we've been able to separate out for every state. We search the full document that the state provides without figuring out which pieces of it are, amending which section of the code. We're working with some other organizations that are looking at state code in more detail, and it seems like when that stuff is rolled out, which I imagine will be in a few months, there will be a way to link to what sections of the code a bill affects and some things like that that might help to address some of that issue.
And on the screen, I just did an example for the searching with the AND operator with ethics and public financing.
The next question unanswered. There's a question just about what software we use for our search engine. It is a combination of some custom software that we've written, but behind the scenes it's powered by Elasticsearch. That's the tool, which even further behind the scenes is a Solr-based product. Let's see.
And if folks have, any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself by hitting *7.
Yeah, if anybody has any other questions that aren't in the chat or that I've missed somehow in the chat, feel free to send them again. Are you sending out emails or newsletter with updates on the product? If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there is a sign up to get on the Sunlight list, be notified of similar products and updates to OpenSpace. The other place to stay informed would be just by following the SunlightFoundation.com blog. Any major announcements will be going out there. And there's also an OpenStates Twitter account where we will tweet probably more minor things. We're always making tweaks to the site, and things that don't merit a full blog post will be going out on the OpenStates Twitter account.
And you can,
No,
we have all kinds of updates of open states and other Sunlight resources if you follow us at Sun Foundation on Twitter and Sunlight Foundation on Facebook.
Are there any other questions or, different things or functions that you think would be helpful for your work that anyone wants to bring up? I know one of the things that when I've done trainings for open states in the past, talking with a couple of journalists, one thing that they found would be interesting is to be able to search for bills based on types of co-sponsors. So, for instance, I am trying to figure out who is also co-sponsoring a certain piece of legislation and trying to figure out that type of relationship. Like, let's say, for instance, that James and I are both legislators, and, we always are working together on things, and they just want to see, how, if it's possible to search bills based on co-sponsors, but not only based on one co-sponsor, seeing, multiple folks who are sponsoring the bill. So that was one of the suggestions that some of the reporters in Chicago mentioned to me. So are there any types of, thoughts and uses of how open states can be even more useful to your work? Please feel free to let us know. James, are there any other questions online?
No other questions, unless I've missed anyone. If anybody wants to chime in if I've missed your question, let me know.
And if you happen to use open states for a research project, blog post, visualization, or otherwise, we'd love to feature that on Sunlight Foundation's blog, and we'd love to know about it. So please feel free to send it our way. Contact form, SunlightFoundation.com is fine, or on open states, or you can send an email to Amy. I think you shared your info. Or you can send me an email. My email is gab, G-A-B, @SunlightFoundation.com.
I think there's a question online.
Could you show us an example of an email notification of action change? I'm not sure.
Want to share, your desktop if you have an email that's come through from?
Let me see. Let me see if I can dig up an email. I actually don't think I have any examples handy at the moment. I might.
And while he's pulling that up, I also want to just briefly mention, I'm sure a lot of folks know about another tool that we built out last year. It's called Scout. And Scout actually does similar things in terms of being able to provide you with email alerts and information. And the data that we've talked about that's behind Open States is also a data set that powers Scout. So let's say, for instance, I go back to the ethics example. You can put it in Scout, and then you can see the different data sets on the left-hand side. So this is now pulling information from, bills in Congress on the federal level, also speeches in Congress, which is the congressional record, as well as state bills, which is what Open States powers, federal regulations, and GAO reports. So if you are looking for a more comprehensive way of receiving alerts and information, not just necessarily on the specifically state level, Scout's also a really, really useful tool. And I bring this up because I have lots of Scout alerts in my inbox if folks wanted to see what those alerts look like. And then it's really easy to create the alert just by hitting Create Alert. And what that does is then you can see it in your subscriptions page that I just created an alert for ethics on state bills. And while we're in here, I will also want to mention that the email alerts that are powering Open States is actually the same system that powers Scout. So the email alerts are actually managed by Scouts. So I would imagine they would look very similar. James, do you have an example? Or
I wasn't able to find one. I'm sorry. It's an email that you'll get nightly. It has a list of bills that have had activity and shows you what that last activity was. So any bill that you're following or that meets your search criteria, it'll show, for example, something like the name of the bill, and then it'll tell you that the last activity was February 20th. 2013, and then show you what that action was, and you can click through and get to the Open State site. They're simple emails, and you can always unsubscribe from them, but unfortunately I don't have a good example right now.
I can share one that I get on state bills from Scout. You can see my inbox here. So this is one that we have, so as James was mentioning, is the bill number and the most recent activity, and a summary if there is one. So then if you click on that, this is one of my Scout alerts, so it will bring me to the Scout page. The alerts are very similar because it is powered by the same data set behind Open States. Are there other questions? Okay, so we're closing in on the hour. So I just wanted to mention again that I know the audio quality was not the best, so if you wanted to watch the video, you can do so here. And then additionally, we have a tutorial on Open States that you can watch on the Sunlight Academy, which is also linked from the homepage. And I briefly mentioned that there is an iPhone and an iPad app, and that's also featured on the homepage on the right-hand column. So if you're on the go, don't necessarily have your laptop in front of you, this is also a great way to access the information and the data on state legislation. And if you do have any questions, you can feel free to just send us an email. And our contact information is up on the slide right now. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining and participating. And it's always great to have so much interest on the different tools and resources that we make, because the information and the work that we do is really about liberating data and making it useful for folks like you on the phone and online.